Yo gamers, Nature here. Today we're going to go over a really interesting topic, which is what the flip is going on with hunters right now. Like, really, why is range hunter so bad? And the real question no one's even asked yet is, what's going on with the melee hunter? Is this here to stay? Or is it just the next flavor of the month club, the die and victim in season of discovery? Well, we don't know for sure, but let's take a look as the hunter community and see what we can come up with. Before we hop into it, just make sure you hit the like and subscribe, mash that button. It really helps, and I appreciate y'all that support. For starters, let's really answer how bad is range hunter. And let's take a look at the data here, and I'll exclude the bottom percentage and the top percentage, of course, but in the bottom 10th percentile, you can see that there's a 38% gap in the damage done by melee hunter versus range hunter. When we go to the 25th percentile of players, it's a 35% gap. Now, if we go to the median, the 50th percentile, we're right at about 33% gap. In the top 75th percentile, it's a 32% gap, while the top 90% is a 30% gap. So we can clearly see a trend that across the board, range hunter is down about 35% damage from the melee hunter player. Now, I will note the way that this scales is important to look at. What this is indicating for us is that a melee hunter takes less skill to play than a ranged hunter. That's why there's a bigger gap the lower skill we go down. In all fairness, though, we cannot leave out the simple fact that those who care about higher performance on average will go to the best spec. Therefore, melee hunter has an edge and therefore a decent advantage as well. So although we can't say for sure, we can surely assume a equal skilled hunter going range DPS versus an equal skilled hunter going melee would lower the gap for sure, but it is not going to eliminate a 30% gap, right? With that being said, Blizzard did just announce 3 changes going into effect on March 5th for US servers and March 6th for EU. Chimera Shot, the damage is increased to 120% of weapon damage where it was 100%. In Chimera Shot, the Serpent Sting damage is increased from 48% from the base of 40%. Now, Explosive Shot is going to be increased by 15% on the base damage before the multipliers, and carve damage is also increased by 15%. Now, I will say with Chimera Shot, this is roughly about a 3% gain. I'll include the math here, but I will say if you're not doing this already, make sure that you start implementing and using Explosive Shot and carve on trash pulls and Nomergon. What I mean by that is you can actually put the rune on a second pair of gloves, and then you can equip it for trash and then switch it back for bosses. The best way to do this is actually to make a macro to equip the second pair of gloves, or you can actually set it up in an add-on like item rack. For this in overall damage, this is actually a decent buff for us, and we should definitely take advantage of it and utilize it, because this is like a massive deal by using Explosive Shot and carve to close that gap and help reduce the effects of the buffs that we've seen recently. Now, you may look at this though and say, well, Nature, as a range hunter, you really only use Chimera Shot on bosses, so that 3% damage increase really won't close the gap between a range hunter and melee. And quite frankly, you are right. So the real question is, why didn't Blizzard just go ahead and take range hunter abilities and the damage done by them and just increase them by essentially that 30% to close the gap that we just talked about? Well, let me tell you, that's not the real question. I'll take you all the way back to 2006 when I graduated high school and I had a free summer to play original release of World of Warcraft. Stop. Don't look at me like that. Yes, I'm in my mid-30s. But way back in the day, I did get Grand Master or Grand Marshal on 2 hunters, and I got Gladiator on those 2 hunters as well, the first 3 seasons of TBC. So I digress. The point I'm trying to make here is an original classic. This was built in a world and an understanding that your entire toolkit was really focused around PvP. Unlike modern versions of WoW that do basically the opposite, they focus on building your toolkit around PvE. Then once that's done, they add abilities to offset the unbalance in PvP, and a lot of times just give each class like very similar versions of like the same thing or same type of ability. For example, if you hop into retail, every class basically has a last stand ability that gives you extra health and reduces damage for a duration. Hunters are the odd man out in this type of scenario that's in WoW Classic. Basically, a hunter in original Classic could do 1/3 of the DPS of a warrior while still being one of the top classes in PvP. This is why the best guilds in the world for PvE only run one hunter in dungeons like BWL, AQ40, and Nax in the 2019 release of Classic. Now, you may say, Nature, what about Trank Shot or True Shot Aura? And I can assure you that you only need one Trank Shot in all these dungeons. I've been in #1 clears world in all of them, and True Shot Aura doesn't compensate for the lack of damage. Not even close. If we were to tip the scale in original Classic and make hunters do the same damage, let's say a rogue did, well, it's just GG. Hunter would be absolutely broken and uncontested, I guarantee you. So this brings me back around kind of to Season of Discovery. You can already see that hunters, when provided with decent damage, seem very unbalanced in PvP. And I will say balancing hunters is an insanely difficult job, and I would never do it. And I would be honest, Blizzard not only seemed to know this problem before us as a community even pointed it out, but they have actually done a really good job of handling it. Now, I know this may be shocking to hear, but when your job is to balance the almost unbalanceable, having a version of Hunter that is fun to play at least most of the time is a win in my book. Now, there's 3 real strategies you can see that Blizzard is taking, and this is all important because these are things that are probably here to stay. This isn't a strategy to make hunters viable in both PvE and PvP, which is what we ultimately want. Strategy 1 is just giving us an underwhelming rune toolkit compared to other classes. This is meant to make a select set of runes that really we primarily use in that PvE content in order to help close the gap. But these sets of runes need to be weak in like PvP, for example. So as hunters, the toolkits, as our hunter toolkit gets larger, you'll see our runes kind of are lackluster versus other classes because our base PvP toolkit is kind of like the opposite. So let's take a look at this phase, for example. Steady Shot is just unviable. It's 60% damage, while in most versions of the game, it's 100%. Trap Launcher, well, it's great in PvP, but typically it's not even worth a global cooldown in PvE because it does so little damage. And oh, not to mention, we would never use either of these runes because we're going to use dual wield in melee specialists because they're so strong. Now, Invigoration, we would never use in PvE because it adds no damage while other runes do damage. Expose Weakness, okay, I'll give you that's a decent rune, but let's be real, we're not going to use that one either. On Gloves, I'll admit as well, these are decent runes, but it's sad that the only rune you don't actually need to do anything with, which is the Beast Mastery one, is the one that we do. Like, there's no button to press, right? It's very casual friendly on the rune. It just automatically adds damage. While on the legs, these are all bad. Like, really, they're bad. Sniper training just doesn't even work right. Like, it's supposed to give you, like, sniper training, you guys, is supposed to give you a buff that lasts for 15 seconds after you stand still for the 6 seconds. So then there'd be like a 9-second window that you could move, maybe weave. You could do like mechanics, while like the version of sniper training we have just disappears if you move for some reason. Now, lastly, Aspect of the Lion is still the only real option on chest, since Lone Wolf had a quick glimpse and is just that's just ruined by the recent nerfs. But the real secret here with Lion, you guys, is this forces us to get invited to raids despite if we were like nerfed and did less damage. So this is a tactic you would usually reserve for meme classes, which Hunter is literally the only DPS in all of Season of Discovery that only has one role. In fact, it's the only class that has one role. Like, seriously, why do we have the biggest meme spec ability that gets us into raids if we are like the only non-meme spec? Technically, that's what we are with. So I would say, like, please fix Lion. Hunters should be able to do Aspect of the Lion as a learned book ability, kind of like Viper, but in return, Lion should only add 10% stats, the same as Kings. Then our Lion rune, the rune on chest, should add the extra 10%. So we should get 10 from the innate spellbook ability, plus 10 if we decide to use the rune for the 20% total. So this actually would open it up. We could use other runes if we chose to, right? With all the rune ramp being said and out of the way, the strategy number 2 is actually to bring damage away from range hunter abilities and put them into like melee hunter abilities or like pet abilities. We can see that in phase 1, Beast Mastery was king basically the whole phase, and in phase 2, melee hunter is king, and Beast Mastery is also like king with it at the moment. So again, the reason for this is, imagine right now in your heads, just imagine if range hunters right now did the same amount of damage as a melee hunter. Not only do range hunters have a bigger toolkit, but they also, their range. So range just has an innate built-in advantage, right? So you can see other classes like mage go about with this a little bit differently. For example, a mage has some good PvP abilities built in, like sheep or blink, into like their normal toolkit. However, a frost mage is really where you see a mage shine in PvP. But when it comes to PvE, a frost mage right now is absolutely horrible, right? It's the bottom of the list. Guess who's right above it? Ranged hunter. So what is kind of happening is hunters have a big problem, is we don't have the same like PvP to PvE shield that some other classes have. So if a hunter switches from Beast Mastery Spec to Marksman, for example, that's not the same as a mage going from like a Fire Spec, which is meant to be PvE, to a Frost Spec, which is meant to be PvP. So as a hunter, all of the specs are useful in both PvP and PvE, but if you really dissect and look at it, cough cough, wink wink, Beast Mastery in Original Classic is the worst PvP spec. So it makes the most sense to buff the Beast Mastery tree in order to basically get hunters closer to the PvE threshold of damage of other classes without making them broken. And yes, I'm fully aware hunter pets were broken in phase 1, but you get my point here. That's the tree they could put in the most extra little DPS as Blizzard and get them closer to the damage threshold of other classes without making them completely broken. But I want you to imagine right now if a hunter really did have the same damage as other classes. Really think about this. And if you're a hunter player, go out as a range build right now and check out the STV event. Range hunter is still really good in PvP despite being one of the lowest damage classes. So really, I hear most hunters saying this is going to be a phase, guys. Don't worry, they'll change this in a week or two. Oh, this is a melee hunter and like the Pokemon version of hunter. I mean the Power World version, the pet trainer spec, the Beast Mastery spec. They won't be here to stay, right? This is all cope. I'm gonna have an unpopular take and say, just call it wrong. I think melee hunter is here to stay. I don't think it's far-fetched if it's like top damage over ranged and other phases, and I think Beast Mastery is here to stay as well. So this brings me to strategy 3 of Blizzard. Both marksman and survival builds are more complicated, gear dependent, and skill dependent than Beast Mastery and melee hunter. We can already prove this right now in our current phase that lower skill hunters, that melee on the high end is a much higher gap. I think the most players that watch this, or most of the players that watch this video, are probably above average. But let's be real, the category of WoW Classic players in Season of Discovery is casuals, and this suits the player base more. And Blizzard wants to make it more casual friendly environment, so not only are people drawn and can play the game, but they can do alts and other things, which creates more content. Now, I'm always torn on this topic because I don't really consider myself a casual, but I don't like playing it in a dead game either. It's not fun. I remember playing in Season of Mastery, the hardest version of Classic WoW that's been out so far, and it was a dead game. It wasn't fun. It's usually when Blizzard makes the game casual friendly that the world is then populated, and if they make the content easy, that population tends to stay. And let's be honest, a casual player in casual, or a non-casual player, can do things with the community like parse and do speed runs, which creates their own content. So the better version, more populated version of the game for Blizzard is to have it casual friendly, because that allows both us as non-casuals to have content and the casuals to have content as well. With all being true, that's why SOD is basically killing it. However, in reality, I get the question, when is Range Hunter or Beast Mastery Hunter going away? Well, I can't know for sure, but I'd have to say that it's not. It's dug in deep. It's ready to fight. Now, you guys, I want to hear all the comments. I want to hear what you guys have to say. Put that in the description below. And as always, make sure you mash that like and subscribe button. And if you're really feeling like a croc, well, hit the membership, join the Croc Nation. Other than that, you guys, peace.